The rescue team found her 2 hours after dawn. Sergeant Torres led the squad personally. When reports came in that the Western attack had collapsed, that Vethkai forces were fleeing in disorder, no one could explain why. The main battle on the eastern ridge had gone poorly. Human forces had held, but barely. There should have been nothing to stop a flanking force, unless something did. Torres was the first to enter Trench 14. He stopped 3 steps in and could not move further. Bodies everywhere. Vethkai warriors piled on top of each other, filling the narrow passages like dark driftwood. The smell of blood and burned flesh hung thick in the air. Plasma scoring covered the walls. Broken weapons lay scattered in the mud dot, and at the end of the corridor, slumped against the wall, was Cadet Elena Vasquez. She was still breathing. Torres ran to her side and knelt in the mud. Her uniform was so soaked in blood that he could not tell human from alien. Her face was pale beneath the dirt, but her chest rose and fell, slowly, steadily. In her hand, she clutched the handle of a ruined thermos. Her fingers would not let it go, even unconscious. Medical team. Torres shouted, "Now!" They carried her out on a stretcher. Behind them, the counting began. Final tally, 187 confirmed Vethkai dead. 1 cadet. 1 forgotten trench. 1 impossible night. Elena woke in a medical bay 3 days later. The lights were too bright. Everything hurt. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Lieutenant Morrow sat in a chair beside her bed. He looked like he had not slept. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "Easy," he said. "You almost died. Twice. The doctors had to put you back together piece by piece." Elena's voice came out as a croak. "The trench held. The flanking attack never reached us. Because of you." Morrow shook his head slowly. "Command wants to know how. The whole military wants to know how. 1 cadet, alone, against 400 Vethkai. They're calling it the most successful defensive action in the history of this war." Elena closed her eyes. The memories came back in fragments. Fire and blood and screaming. The weight of her knife. The sound of bodies falling. "I didn't have a choice," she said. "They were there. I was there. Running would have gotten me killed." She opened her eyes. "So I made them work for it." Morrow stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a tired, disbelieving sound. "Made them work for it. That's what you call it. What else would I call it?" He had no answer. 6 months later, Lieutenant Elena Vasquez stood on the landing platform of Firebase Delta, watching a transport descend through the red clouds of Calvos 7. The war had changed since that night in Trench 14. The Vethkai still fought, but differently. Their tactics were more cautious. Their commanders hesitated before engaging isolated human positions. Intelligence had intercepted new doctrines, new classifications. They called certain positions unpredictable resistance zones, URZ, places where human defenders might turn the battlefield into something unwinnable. Places to avoid. Elena understood what they really meant. They meant places where a human might be stubborn enough to die standing up. Places where spite could become strategy. The transport landed. Its doors opened, and new soldiers filed out. Fresh faces, clean uniforms, nervous eyes. Reinforcements for the ongoing campaign. Elena watched them form ranks and remembered being that young. It felt like a lifetime ago. One of them caught her attention. A young man near the back, barely 20. He carried his pack wrong and held his rifle like he was afraid of it. And across the front of his uniform, spreading like brown flowers, were coffee stains. The other recruits laughed at him. He looked down at his uniform and tried uselessly to wipe the stains away. His face burned red with embarrassment. Elena watched for a moment. Then she walked over. The recruits snapped to attention when they saw her rank insignia. The young man looked up at her with wide, uncertain eyes. "What's your name, soldier?" Elena asked. "C. Cadet Chen, ma'am." "David Chen, you spilled coffee on yourself." His face got even redder. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm clumsy. I always..." Elena reached into her pack and pulled out a thermos. Silver, dented, with a new handle welded on to replace the broken one. The original thermos, repaired. She had kept it. She handed it to him. Chen took it, confused. "Ma'am, keep it full," Elena said. "You never know when you'll need a decoy." She turned and walked away before he could ask what she meant. Behind her, the other recruits crowded around Shen, suddenly interested in the thermos, in the strange gift, in the scarred lieutenant who had given it. Someone would tell him the story. Someone always did. In a captured Vethkai tactical database, recovered during a raid 2 weeks later, human intelligence officers found an interesting document. It was a briefing prepared for new Vethkai officers, warning them about human defenders. The relevant passage read, "Do not underestimate humans. Even their weakest may become killing grounds. A single isolated defender, given time and motivation, can transform any position into an unwinnable engagement. Humans do not respond to fear the way other species do. They do not break under pressure. They do not surrender when hope is lost. Instead, they become more dangerous. Approach all human positions with extreme caution. What appears to be weakness may be deception. What appears to be defeat may be a trap. And if you find yourself facing a human who refuses to die, consider withdrawal. Because humans have a quality we cannot match. They do not surrender to fear. They befriend it." Elena never read that document. She did not need to. She knew what she was. She was a coffee girl who had learned to fight. A forgotten soldier who had refused to be forgotten. A small, stubborn human who had looked at impossible odds and decided that dying was not the worst thing. That could happen. Giving up was worse. And so she had not given up. And she had lived. And now she stood on a platform under red skies, watching a new generation of soldiers arrive, hoping that some of them would learn what she had. Learn. War was not about strength or numbers or weapons. War was about will, and humans had more will than any species in the galaxy understood. The transport lifted off, leaving the new recruits behind. Elena watched it rise until it disappeared into the clouds. Then she turned and walked back toward the barracks. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But first, she needed coffee. The silence did not last. Elena knew better than to believe the Vethkai were truly gone. They had retreated, yes, but retreat was not defeat. General Kethvorin was regrouping, reconsidering, planning something new. She used the time wisely. Her wounds needed attention. The claw rake across her ribs was deep but clean. She pressed a torn piece of uniform against it to slow the bleeding. The bite on her forearm was worse. Vethkai saliva contained enzymes that kept wounds from closing. She needed to cauterize it. Elena found a dead warrior's plasma pistol, still holding a partial charge. She set it to its lowest power and pressed the emitter against her arm. The pain was beyond anything she had ever felt. She bit down on her rifle strap to keep from screaming. The smell of her own burning flesh filled her nose. Tears streamed down her face. But when she pulled the pistol away, the wound was sealed. She sat for a moment, breathing hard, waiting for the world to stop spinning. Then she got up and started preparing. The trench was a ruin now. Her traps were spent. Her ammunition was gone. She had one half-charged plasma pistol and a combat knife against an entire Vethkai column. Those weapons meant nothing. But she still had the trench itself. Elena studied the walls. Mud and rock, poorly reinforced, already weakened by explosions. A few strategic collapses would change the entire structure of the battlefield. She found the support beams, holding up the wider sections, old mining equipment, driven into the walls to prevent cave-ins. If she removed them in the right order, she could bring down specific areas while keeping others intact. She worked through the pain. Her hands slipped on the bloody beams. Her vision kept fading at the edges, but she kept working. When she finished, Trench 14 had only one approach. Every other path was blocked by fallen debris. The Vethkai would have to come at her through a corridor barely wide enough. For 2 warriors at a time, their numbers would mean nothing. Their coordination would mean nothing. Every advantage they had would disappear in that narrow passage. It was almost dawn when they came back. General Kethvorin had committed his reserves. 300 warriors, the best of his column, fresh and eager for blood. He sent them in a single overwhelming wave. The sound of them was like thunder. Hundreds of clawed feet pounding the earth. Hundreds of voices clicking in battle-fury. Elena waited at the end of the corridor. Her pistol was steady in her hand. The first warriors appeared. 2 of them, side by side, filling the passage. She shot them both. Their bodies fell, creating obstacles for those behind. More came. They climbed over the dead. She shot them too, but she could not shoot them all. The pistol overheated after 10 shots. She threw it aside and raised her knife. The next warrior reached her. It was bigger than the others, a commander cast with armored plates on its shoulders. It swung at her with all 4 arms. Elena ducked under the first blow, deflected the second with her forearm guard, and drove her knife into the joint between the creature's head and body. Hot fluid sprayed across her face. The warrior collapsed. Another took its place, and another. Elena fought like something beyond human. Pain became fuel. Exhaustion became strength. Every wound she took, she returned tenfold. The Vethkai watched their brothers die. They saw the small, broken human, covered in blood and filth, smile at them with bloody teeth. They saw her take injuries that should have killed her and keep fighting. They saw her laugh when they surrounded her. Something in their hive mind fractured. The Vethkai did not understand spite. Their species had no word for it. They fought for the hive, for survival, for resources. They did not fight simply to make an enemy suffer. They did not continue when victory was impossible, but this human did. She fought not because she could win, but because she refused to let them win easily. She bled on them out of pure stubborn rage. She made every step they took cost more than it was worth, and that was terrifying. One warrior turned and ran, then another, then a dozen. The fear spread through the hive mind like fire. Through dry grass, soldiers who had never fled began fleeing. The assault collapsed from inside. General Kethvorin saw it happen. He screamed commands through the chemical links, ordering his troops to hold. But fear was stronger than obedience. For the first time in his life, his soldiers did not listen. The retreat became a rout. Vethkai warriors fled the trench, fled the dead zone, fled toward the safety of their own lines. Kethvorin stood alone in his command post, watching his army break. A communications officer approached him, trembling. "General, what designation should we give this position for future operations?" Kethvorin thought about it. In the Vethkai language, there was no word for what he had witnessed, no term for a place. Where one enemy became an army, no name for the kind of fight that broke spirits instead of bodies. But he had studied human military terminology. He had read their captured documents, tried to understand their strange way of war, and he remembered a phrase they used, "market." He said slowly, as a killing zone. The officer hesitated. "General, that is a human term." "I know." Kethvorin turned away from the battlefield. "There's no Vethkai word for what we experienced tonight, so we will use theirs. In Trench 14, Elena stopped fighting. Because there was no one left to fight, she stood in the narrow corridor, surrounded by the dead. Her knife hung loose in her hand. Blood dripped from a dozen wounds she could not feel anymore. The first light of dawn touched the eastern sky, orange and pink and gold, spreading across the horizon. Like hope. Elena walked slowly to the trench wall and leaned against it. Then she slid down, leaving a red smear on the mud. She was so tired, more tired than she had ever been. Her eyes drifted to the ruined thermos, lying in pieces nearby. The coffee stain on her uniform seemed absurd now. Such a small thing, such a silly thing. She started laughing, quiet at first, then louder. The sound echoed off the trench walls, mixing with the silence of the dead. She was alive. She had no right to be alive. By every rule of war, she should be dead. But she was alive, and the enemy was running, and the sun was rising over a field of corpses. Elena closed her eyes. She had done enough. The second wave hit like a black tide. 50 Vethkai warriors poured into the trench from 3 directions at once. They had learned from the first attack. They moved in coordinated groups, covering each other, checking for traps. Their clicks and hisses filled the air like angry static. Elena was already moving. She triggered her second fuel trap as the first group passed over it. The explosion sent bodies flying. Before the flames died, she fired 4 shots into the confusion, then dropped flat and crawled through a drainage channel she had found earlier. The channel was tight and filled with cold water, but it connected to parts of the trench without exposing her to open ground. She emerged behind a group of warriors who were searching the wrong direction. 3 quick shots. 3 down. Then she was moving again. The Vethkai could not understand it. Their doctrine was clear. Isolated enemies collapsed under pressure. One soldier, alone, without support or supplies, should surrender or die quickly. That was how war worked. That was how it had always worked against other species. But this human refused to follow the rules. She never stayed in one place. She appeared from unexpected angles, killed and vanished. She used their own caution against them, letting them waste ammunition on shadows while she circled behind. When they charged, she fell back. When they regrouped, she attacked. In our past. Then too, the Vethkai losses mounted. Elena was exhausted now. Her arms ached from carrying her rifle. Her legs burned from constant movement. She had not slept in almost 20 hours, and the night was only halfway done. She found a moment of quiet and pulled out her thermos. The coffee inside was cold now, but she drank it anyway. The bitter taste helped her focus, pushed back the fog creeping into her mind. Then she noticed something. The thermos was still warm from earlier. Not hot, but warm. And the Vethkai tracked heat signatures. Their compound eyes could see thermal differences better than visible light. Elena looked at the thermos for a long moment. Then she smiled. She placed it on top of a crate at the edge of the trench, in clear view of the enemy positions. A small heat source, just warm enough to look like a hiding body on thermal scanners. A perfect target. She backed away and waited. 2 minutes later, a plasma bolt struck the thermos dead center. The shot came from above, from the sniper cast she had marked earlier. The creature had finally taken the bait. Elena saw the flash and traced its origin. A rocky outcrop, 30 meters beyond the trench. She steadied her rifle, took a breath, and fired. The sniper fell, from the Vethkai lines. General Kethvorin watched through a scout's eyes. The optical link let him see what his soldiers saw, feel what it felt. He had watched the thermos explode. He had seen the return fire. He had felt his sniper die. One human. With coffee, the general's soldiers were beginning to speak among themselves in ways that troubled him. They called the human the ghost in the trench. They said it could not be killed. They said it could see in all directions, could be everywhere at once. These were not rational assessments. These were the beginnings of fear. Kethvorin had never seen his soldiers fear a single enemy before. The hive mind did not permit such weakness. Yet here it was, spreading through his column like disease. He needed to end this quickly. Artillery. He ordered. Target the trench. His communications officer hesitated. General, the column is too close. If the human retreats into the deeper sections, the bombardment will kill our own forces. Then push the column forward. Force the human to the surface. Then destroy everything. Elena heard them coming. All of them this time. The entire remaining force, charging at once. She fired until her rifle clicked empty. Then she threw it aside and grabbed a plasma pistol from a dead Vethkai. The weapon felt wrong in her hands, too heavy and badly balanced, but she made it work. A warrior lunged at her from the left. She shot it. Another came from the right. She shot it too, but there were too many now. They were everywhere, filling the trench like water filling a bowl. Elena ran. She triggered her last fuel trap as she passed it. Not to kill, but to create a wall of fire behind her. The flames bought her seconds. Precious seconds that she used to reach a reinforced section of trench with only one entrance. A bottleneck. The only advantage she had left. The Vethkai came through one at a time. Elena killed them one at a time. The pistol overheated. She grabbed a metal rod and used it as a club. Then she found a combat knife in the mud and used that instead. A claw raked across her ribs. She felt hot blood running down her side, but did not stop. A warrior bit her forearm. She stabbed it in the eye and kept fighting. The bodies piled up. The entrance became blocked. The Vethkai had to climb over their own dead to reach her. And still Elena fought. Her vision was blurring now. Blood loss, exhaustion, shock. She did not know how much longer she could stand. But she knew one thing for certain. She was not going to die on her knees, outside. General Kethvorin received another report. More casualties. More failures. The human was wounded but still fighting. Why won't it fall? He demanded. No one answered. The hive mind had no explanation. Their entire doctrine was built on the assumption that enemy morale broke under pressure. That isolation led to despair. That pain led to surrender. This human experienced all these things and became more dangerous. Keth Voran looked at the sky. Dawn was approaching. Human reinforcements would arrive with the light. If he did not take this trench before then, his entire flanking strategy would fail. But looking at the carnage before him, at the bodies of his warriors stacked in the mud, he began to understand something. This was not a position he could take. This was not a fight he could win. This was a lesson. He gave an order he had never given before in his long career. Fall back. Regroup at secondary positions. His officers stared at him. Now, he said. The Vethkai withdrew from Trench 14. They carried their wounded and left their dead. They moved in silence, their clicking strangely subdued dot inside the trench. Elena heard the sounds fading. She did not trust it at first. She kept her knife ready, kept her back to the wall, but the attacks did not come. She waited until she could not hear them anymore. Then she slid down the wall and sat in the mud. Among the bodies of her enemies, she was shaking. Her whole body was shaking, but she was alive. Elena worked fast. Her hands moved without stopping, even as her mind raced ahead to the next task. She had maybe 20 minutes now. Maybe less. The fuel canisters were heavy, but she dragged them anyway. 3 of them, each half full of engine fuel. She buried them in shallow holes along the main path into the trench, covering them with loose dirt and debris. Then she ran wire from each one to a detonator, hiding the connections under rocks. The mining detonators were old but still worked. She found 6 of them in the rusted box, along with a manual timer that someone had forgotten to take. Elena had never used explosives before, but she had studied them in class. Theory was about to become practice. She repositioned the broken turret next. It could not fire anymore, but the Vethkai would not know that. She propped it up at the far end of the trench, pointing outward, and hung a torn piece of cloth from its barrel so it would move in the wind. In the darkness, it would look like a manned position. A target. Next came the false foxholes. Elena dug 3 shallow pits along the trench walls, just deep enough to look like hiding spots. She stuffed them with empty supply crates ranged to look like crouching bodies. Shadows would do the rest. The communication wire became trip lines. She stretched them across narrow points in the trench, connecting them to flares she found in an emergency kit. Anyone who walked through without looking down would announce their presence with bright red light. Finally, she made noisemakers, old cans filled with rocks, hanging from strings in places where the enemy might take cover. If something touched them, she would hear it. When she finished, Elena leaned against the trench wall and caught her breath. Her uniform was covered in mud now, mixing with the coffee stains. She looked like a disaster. She felt like one to dot, but the trench no longer looked like a forgotten hole in the ground. It looked like a maze, a puzzle box, a place where nothing was what it seemed. Her scanner beeped again. The green dots were closer now. Elena found a position near the middle of the trench, where she could see in both directions, but remain hidden behind a pile of debris. She held her rifle close and waited. The Vethkai came on silent feet. She heard them before she saw them. A soft clicking sound, like insects tapping on glass. Then movement in the darkness, black shapes flowing over the ground like oil. The scouts came first, 4 of them, checking the path ahead for the main column. Elena pressed herself flat against the mud. Her heart pounded so hard she thought they might hear it. The scouts moved carefully. They checked the ground with their lower arms while their upper arms held weapons. Their heads turned constantly, antennae twitching as they smelled the air. One of them stopped near the entrance to the trench. It clicked something to the others. They seemed to discuss, their sounds rising and falling in a language Elena would never understand. Then they entered. They chose the safe path, the one Elena had left clear of obvious obstacles. The path that led directly to the first buried fuel canister. Elena counted to 5 in her head. Let them get deep enough. Let them commit. Then she pressed the detonator. Fire erupted from the ground. The fuel canister exploded in a ball of orange flame, catching all 4 scouts in the blast. They screamed in frequencies that hurt Elena's ears, high and sharp like breaking glass. 2 died instantly. The other 2 stumbled and burned, their shells cracking from the heat. Elena shot them both. 2 quick bursts from her rifle. The screaming stopped. Behind her, deeper in the darkness, The Vefkai column halted. She could not see them, but she felt the change. Hundreds of warriors suddenly unsure of what lay ahead. Elena did not wait. She grabbed her pack and moved to a new position 20 meters away. Never stay where they last saw you. That was rule number 1. Minutes pass. Then she heard new sounds. More clicking, more movement. The Vefkai were sending another group. This time, 10 warriors entered the trench. They came slowly, checking every shadow. One of them found the second fuel canister before it could be triggered. It clicked loudly, warning the others, but they did not find the tripwire. A flare shot into the sky, bathing the trench in red light. For 1 second, every Vefkai warrior was perfectly visible. Elena fired. 3 shots, 3 hits. Then she rolled behind cover as plasma bolts screamed over her head. She crawled through the mud to another position. The Vefkai were shooting at where she used to be, not where she was now. Good. The false foxholes did their work. An enemy warrior fired a full burst into one of them, destroying the empty crates. While it was distracted, Elena shot it from behind. The trench filled with chaos. Vefkai warriors stumbled over tripwires, crashed into noisemakers, shot at shadows and decoys. They could not find the real threat. They could not coordinate. Elena understood why. The Vefkai used pheromones to communicate in battle. Their leader released chemical signals that told the soldiers what to do. But fire destroyed those signals. Smoke confused their senses. And every time they tried to gather and regroup, Elena made them scatter again. She was not fighting for 100 warriors. She was fighting small groups of confused individuals. And confused individuals made mistakes. The broken turret drew fire from a sniper cast hidden in the rocks beyond the trench. The plasma bolt melted the barrel, but the shooter had revealed its position, and Elena marked it carefully. She would deal with that one later. After 30 minutes, the attack stopped. The Vefkai pulled back to reassess. Elena used the time to relocate her remaining detonators and create new tripwires from the wire she had left far behind the Vefkai lines. In a command position marked by glowing chemical lights, Subhive General Keth Voran received reports from his surviving scouts. The news was not good. How many humans hold the trench? He asked. The scout trembled. We believe 1, General. Keth Voran's antenna flattened against his skull. 1 human. 1 small, weak, soft-bodied creature was blocking his entire flanking force. Send the second wave. He ordered. Overwhelm the position. I want that trench cleared before the smaller moon rises. His warriors obeyed. They always obeyed. The hive mind knew no other way. In trench 14, Elena heard them coming. More of them this time. Many more. She checked her rifle. 28 shots remaining. She took a deep breath and smiled. Not because she was happy, but because she was still alive, and the night was young, and the Vefkai had no idea what they were walking into. Her grandmother used to say that humans were too stubborn to know when they were beaten. Grandmother was right. Elena Vasquez had coffee stains on her uniform again. 3 of them this time, spreading across her chest like brown flowers. She tried to wipe them with her sleeve, but that only made things worse. It always made things worse. Vasquez, more coffee, now. Sergeant Torres shouted from across the command tent. She grabbed the pot and hurried over, filling cups for officers who never looked at her face. To them, she was just a coffee girl. 19 years old, small, clumsy, and completely forgettable. Every platoon had someone like her. Someone who carried supplies and made drinks and stayed far away from real fighting. The planet Calvo 7 was not a nice place. Red dust covered everything. The air tasted like metal. 2 suns burned in the sky during the day, and at night, the Vefkai came. Elena had seen them only once, from far away. Tall insect creatures with forearms and black shells that reflected no light. They moved in swarms, thousands of them clicking and hissing as they attacked. The sound alone was enough to freeze a soldier's blood. Tonight, everyone expected a big attack. Scouts reported Vefkai forces gathering along the eastern ridge. Command was pulling every soldier to the front line. Every soldier who mattered, anyway. Lieutenant Morrow found Elena refilling her thermos in the supply tent. He was a tired man with gray in his hair and worry in his eyes. He looked at her for a long moment, and Elena felt her stomach drop. Officers only noticed her when something bad was about to happen. "Vasquez," he said, "I need you to hold Trench 14. She blinked. "Sir, Trench 14, West Sector. It's a dead zone. Nothing ever happens there. But regulations say we need someone watching it." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I don't have anyone else. Everyone's going to the ridge. Alone, sir. You'll have a radio. Call if you see anything. Don't try to be a hero. Just watch and report." He put a hand on her shoulder. His grip was not unkind. "Don't die, Vasquez. That's an order." 30 minutes later, Elena stood at the edge of Trench 14. Looking at her new home. It was 200 meters of sadness. Mud walls crumbling inward. Old supply crates rotting in puddles. A single sentry turret sat at one end, its barrel pointing at the wrong angle, clearly broken. Someone had written "good luck" on the wall in black marker. The letters were faded. Elena dropped her pack and sat on a crate. Her thermos was full of hot coffee. At least she had that. She checked her rifle. Half charged. Enough for maybe 40 shots if she was careful. Not that she would need it. This was a dead zone. Lieutenant Morrow said so. The twin suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Elena watched the light fade and felt very small. Somewhere to the east, her platoon was preparing for battle. Real soldiers doing real things. And here she was, the coffee girl, guarding a forgotten hole in the ground. She almost laughed. Almost. Her scanner beeped. Elena looked at the small screen on her wrist. Green dots appeared at the edge of detection range. 1 dot, then 5, then 20. Then the screen filled with green. So many dots that they blurred together. She stopped breathing. This was not a patrol. This was not a scouting party. This was a full column. Hundreds of HFY warriors, moving through the dead zone toward the human lines. They were flanking. While everyone watched the eastern ridge, the enemy was sneaking through the west. Elena grabbed her radio. "Command, this is Vasquez at Trench 14. I have contact." "Repeat, I have contact. Hundreds of enemy approaching my position. Request immediate support." Static answered her. She tried again. "Command, do you read? This is Trench 14. Emergency. Please respond." Nothing but static. The HFY were jamming communications. Of course they were. They had planned this carefully. Elena's hands began to shake. She was alone. No backup, no support, no way to warn anyone. And somewhere in the growing darkness, 400 alien warriors were marching straight toward her little trench. She could run. That thought came first, and she was not ashamed of it. She could abandon her post and flee back to the main line. Maybe she would make it. Maybe she could warn them in person. But the HFY were fast. Faster than humans. If she ran, they would see her. They would chase her. And they would catch her in the open, where she had no chance at all. At least the trench had walls. At least the trench had the broken turret, and the old crates, and the mud that smelled like failure. Elena looked at her thermos. Steam rose from the opening, curling into the cold night air. She took a long drink. The coffee was bitter and strong, just the way she liked it. "Okay," she said to no one. Her voice sounded strange in the silence. "Okay, think." She was not a fighter. She was not brave. She was a coffee girl with stains on her uniform and a half-charged rifle. But she was also a student who had passed her engineering classes. A granddaughter who had listened to stories about old wars and clever tricks. A chess player who had won for tournaments back home by thinking 3 moves ahead. The HFY were stronger, faster, more numerous. But they thought in straight lines. They followed their leaders without question. They expected enemies to fight or run. Elena was not going to fight. Not the way they expected. She stood and began to walk through the trench, seeing it with new eyes. Fuel canisters left behind by the previous unit. Mining detonators in a rusted box. Spools of communication wire. The broken turret. The rotting crates. The mud. All useless junk. All waiting to be turned into something else. The first HFY scouts would arrive in maybe 30 minutes. That was not much time, but it was enough. Elena finished her coffee, set down the thermos, and got to work, far away. Hidden in the darkness, 400 HFY warriors continued their march. They did not know that a small human with coffee stains on her uniform was preparing to welcome them. They did not know that the dead zone was about to wake up, They would learn.